We've got information up here on the screen that we'll share with you, and then we also distributed an agenda earlier in the day. I don't know if everybody has a copy of that. Okay, wonderful. We can kind of use that as a guide. Again, I'm Andrew Maletz, Mike Dingeldein, both from SHP. Good to see everybody here tonight. I guess Mike and I will both be sharing some information with you, but we wanted to start by taking a little bit of a step back and talking about where we are in the process today, 2011. It was 2008 when the first OSFC master plan was first developed for Southwestern City Schools, and that was the basis for addressing all the buildings in the district at the time. And I would like to just start by kind of revisiting that and then talking about what's transpired both with the district, of course, and also with OSFC, and give you a little bit of context, and then talk about where we are today relative to bringing this process back in front of your community and talking about some of the implications and some of the decision-making that needs to occur. So with that, in 2008, a comprehensive building assessment was done for the district. Everyone probably recalls, many of you recall that process, and it led to a district master plan, and that was put together with participants from the district, leadership, community members, both SHP and Russilli, as well as OSFC. And in the end, it was what we call a district fix, which is the term that's been used by the Commission, and it dealt with all of the facilities in the district to varying degrees. It started with a full replacement of elementary schools with new construction, minor renovations in the newer buildings like Buckeye Woods and Darby, minor renovations to the recently constructed intermediate schools, as well as replacement of the new middle schools, with the exception of Jackson Middle School, and then Central Crossing High School and Career Academy had minor renovations, and then substantial renovations and additions to Grove City High School and Westland High School, and a replacement of Franklin Heights. This also involved demolition of all the necessary buildings, asbestos abatement, and all of the other project responsibilities that would be required. At the time, that was an approximately $440 million master plan with a very nearly shared cost coming from the state of Ohio through the OSFC. So the state was bringing roughly $225 million at the time to the school district to complete this master plan. Since that time, some things have changed. There was an effort made by the school district to secure funding, and when that is not successful, the district enters into what's called a lapsed school district. And don't feel bad, you're not alone. There are many districts in the state that have found themselves in this exact scenario. And a lapsed school district is one that's been approved for funding, but has been unable to raise the required funds within the one-year time commitment that was given as part of a project agreement with the Ohio School Facilities Commission. So that eligibility year expired for Southwestern City Schools in 2009. And since that time, you were in a lapsed district. And what that means to you is that the onus then falls on the district to raise their local share. So instead of being presented with funding from the state of Ohio and then you making the match, the tables turn. You now raise your local share, and then the state brings forward their funds at the next fiscal year cycle. And in this case, we're talking about fiscal year 2013, which is calendar year 2012 for OSFC. With a lapsed school district, there is no immediate guarantee of funding sitting here today. Part of the work that your superintendent has done is to make sure that OSFC knows what your intentions are, and if there is an interest in seeking funding and pursuing the master plan, to advise them that that's what the district would be doing, and then letting them know that, and hopefully getting into a cycle where funding would be made available to you should you be able to secure your local funds. So that's an important term, and we'll come back to that. When you enter into a process of restarting your master planning process, one of the first things that will happen, and has happened here at Southwestern, is enrollment projections get updated. It's been roughly 3.5, 4 years since enrollments were considered. Things change in every district. So that process has been undertaken, has just been recently completed. We don't have the final results in front of us today, but we understand that there are changes in enrollment, and that has to be factored into the overall master plan. Without getting into too much detail about that, I just think it's important for everyone to understand that numbers of students drive square footage of buildings, and square footage of buildings translate into cost. So everything starts with the number of students that are being served in any facility improvement project, and so that's a very important piece of the overall process. We should have the absolute final draft of that within the next few weeks, I presume, if not sooner, but that's an important step along the way. The other piece that's a necessary ingredient for any reconsideration of a master plan process are the funding opportunities. I mentioned OSFC funds. Will there actually be availability of OSFC funds? If the appropriations from the state to OSFC were sitting here at zero today, I think in good conscience we would have to say to everybody, we don't believe there's going to be a realistic funding opportunity in the next 2-3 years. That's not the case right now. There are funds being allocated, so we have reason to believe that there would be available dollars to the district should you be able to raise your local share of the project. And so that's an important ingredient. The other important ingredient is there an opportunity to raise local funds and complete either the master plan or a portion of the master plan here in Southwestern Schools? And you have an opportunity right now, or at least within the next 12 months, to consider a no new effective millage scenario, and that's something that's been discussed, I believe, and creates an opportunity to meet your local obligation of a master plan scenario, and that's something that obviously needs a lot of discussion and something that needs to be considered, and we'll talk about that tonight. The other piece that's important is the state-local share ratio. Has it changed substantially since 2008? It has changed slightly. You were very close to a 50-50 scenario at that time, and now you are exactly at a 50-50 scenario, meaning for every dollar that the school district brings to the conversation, the OSFC brings $1. So it's a 50-50 split. All of those three things combined suggest that there is an opportunity to look at an alternative or look at a master plan and determine if that makes sense for the community to consider. In order to do that, in about 4 years ago, OSFC introduced project segmenting. Up until that time, it was an all-or-nothing proposition. The master plan was created, $440-some-odd million, and you either completed that plan or you didn't. There was no intermediate step. Segmenting allows for an intermediate step. It allows you to complete a portion of your district master plan. What's important about that is that the amount of a master plan that you complete is based on an equation that is equal to 4% of your district's overall valuation. That's a big number when you consider the size of the district's valuation, which is approximately $2.6 billion. Based on that, a 4% valuation, you can see at the bottom of the screen here, translates to approximately $100 million. What that means is that your minimum project size for you to enter into a segmented master plan possibility through OSFC is approximately $200 million. It means a little bit less than half of what the original master plan was. So without getting too tangled up in all the numbers, it's roughly about half the overall master plan that was considered back in 2008, meaning that you would have to agree to that level of participation in order to be considered for a segmented plan, in which case the OSFC would bring that 50-50 share of funding to the school district. So that's a very, very important piece of the overall project, or overall discussion. The other piece of this is important is that while you are allowed to consider portions of the overall master plan, you cannot consider portions of, say, a major renovation project. In other words, Grove City High School was one of those buildings that was in the master plan as a comprehensive renovation and addition. You would not be allowed under the rules of the OSFC to partially renovate that facility or partially add on to that facility. It's an all-or-nothing proposition at the building level, with the exception of your new buildings. Those new buildings that were built after 2000, are considered minor renovation projects, meaning they may be eligible for some technology improvements, things like that. You could just tackle those small pieces of that. Anything other than those buildings that were built recently in the last 10 years, it's an all-or-nothing proposition as far as the OSFC is concerned. So everything that I've shared with you right now, these are all rules that are published and available online through the OSFC. I've tried to kind of summarize and condense those to sort of set the framework for our discussion tonight. Any questions about this? This is an important item. I just want to make sure everybody's with me on that. Okay. So if we take all of that as fact and we say, what kinds of opportunities are there to consider a partial master plan for the district, and can it fulfill all of the criteria that were established back in 2008 in terms of what was important to the community, in terms of the polling and some of the community engagement processes that took place? That's where we wanted to start. So we looked at a decision-making framework and said, what kinds of criteria should be considered in determining which buildings or which projects should be taken into consideration. Well, first of all, if the building was built after the year 2000, it should not be addressed as part of a renovation project. I think that's a logical and hopefully obvious thing, but certainly something worth pointing out. The other is that we would want to address as many facilities as possible. That helps promote equity in the school district and reach as many students in as many facilities as possible. And that was the same, put a slightly different way, improve district-wide equity by trying to bring all the facilities up to some common point that can be achieved. The other decision-making item would be to look at the OSFC assessment of each of your buildings. And some of you may recall, some of you may not, that there is a renovation replacement ratio. Each of your buildings was assessed by an independent architectural engineering team, and each of those buildings was given a renovation cost, meaning what would it take to bring this up to the OSFC standards. And that was compared to what would it take to build that exact amount of square footage in new construction. And so what we're looking for are low versus high ratios. If the ratio of renovation to new construction is 100%, that means that it would take just as much money to renovate the building as it would be to build it from scratch. And so a district would certainly look at that and say, we would have a better investment in building a new building rather than trying to renovate something that may have outlived its useful life. On the other hand, if the ratio is at 10%, like most of your new buildings, 9 to 10%, that's an investment worth keeping, and you certainly wouldn't propose to build a new building. So we're looking for those buildings across the school district that are in that 75% and up range. These are buildings that have some serious needs across the board, from systems to handicap accessibility to overall envelope issues, energy efficiency, all of those things. Those are the buildings that we want to try to address because they have the greatest need. So we'll come back to renovation replacement ratios, but that's it's an important criteria to look at. And then lastly, looking at the overall age of each facility and what are some of the deferred maintenance requirements. You have buildings that you've taken very good care of, but some of them have some very, very significant maintenance requirements coming up over the next 2, 3, 5 years. Roof replacements that could cost several hundreds of thousands of dollars on a single building. So we want to understand those as we think about which buildings might be candidates for either renovation or new construction or replacement. So when we measured all of those different criteria, and I have lots of charts and graphs and things that I'm happy to share if there's questions, but when we looked at all of that, it pointed very, very clearly to the greatest need existing at the elementary school level. Across all of the elementary schools, an opportunity to replace all of those buildings, which fits into the OSFC master plan, but it also addresses the buildings with the greatest need in terms of the renovation replacement scenario, in terms of addressing as many buildings and as many students as possible, raising the overall level of equity within the district. So it became, I want to say, fairly obvious as we looked at this from a planning basis to say that elementary schools were a logical candidate for a partial master plan, with the inclusion of minor renovations at Buckeye Woods and Darby Woods, which are 1995 buildings and certainly don't need and don't have the need for major renovations. Both of those buildings have a ratio of about 20 to 25%, meaning there are some minor renovations that are warranted there, but nothing that rises to the level of what we would consider a major gut renovation. When we did this, when we looked through these buildings and we looked at the enrollments and the costs of replacing the elementary schools, we came to a very sudden conclusion that the overall cost of that project does not meet the minimum OSFC requirement. If you go back 3-4 slides to that $207 million number, the sum total of these buildings would not reach that number. So that posed a question for us to address and a question for the board to address, which is, how do we structure an overall master plan that achieves that minimum threshold, that creates an opportunity to participate in a partial plan with OSFC, which would allow you to capture those state dollars, and then meet that other criteria. So we're sort of at a crossroads at this point where we have to suggest that there may be other projects that should be considered in the master plan. And there are good reasons to consider different scenarios when we talk about that. I think it's you can look at some of the obvious things that wouldn't be candidates, for example, all of those minor renovation new buildings, and you're left with consideration of middle schools as potential candidates for inclusion in the master plan, as well as high schools. Probably the high school with the greatest need being Franklin Heights High School, and the middle schools all being similar candidates for renovation and replacement, the ratio suggesting they should be replaced rather than renovated. So for the 4 middle schools exclusive of Jackson Middle School and Franklin Heights High School become candidates for possible inclusion in the master plan. And we've looked at several different scenarios, including simply just Franklin Heights or all of the middle school, or a combination of both, or some middle schools. And there are good reasons to look at each of those scenarios, and I think we can talk through those and answer questions that you may have about that. But that is a decision that would need to be made here in the next few weeks in order to keep that ball rolling. And we can certainly advise you on that, but we didn't necessarily want to come to this meeting tonight with a specific recommendation, although we have several ideas on what makes the most sense. And we're trying to balance this, I should say, too, with the fact that there is a minimum requirement, certainly, but there's also a maximum requirement. What I think makes good sense for the district is that there's an opportunity to, again, address the no new effective millage scenario, and we certainly don't want to exceed that, and so we want to make sure that we're being very judicious in the decision-making process and not bringing too much project, if you will, to the discussion. So let's depart here for a moment, unless there's questions, and kind of talk about what kinds of opportunities exist within each of these projects. Mike's going to talk about that. It might generate some questions and some ideas about helping you prioritize which scenario might make the most sense. Again, unless there's a question right now that I can answer, I'll turn it over to Mike and we can kind of come back to this point in the discussion.
Thank you, and good evening. One of the things most districts are concerned about is what does it take to comply with OSFC's sort of rules and regulations to get their money. And frankly, that for some districts is a pretty significant departure from what they consider their standards for their physical facilities. In the giant volume of information called the Ohio School Design Manual, about 7 inches thick if you look at it in a pile, it really comes down to 2 basic things: types and size of spaces, which they build around what they call program equity, meaning media centers are based on a certain size student population, cafeterias, classrooms, all the program spaces have a standard that they expect you to meet, and there is variation in that standard depending on the size of the school. And then the other 2/3 of the manual is really about building materials and systems. They use what they call a 6 to 9 scale. If you're on a scale of 1 to 10, they're looking for what we call good, better, best, kind of medium, high to high. You certainly can't afford all high. You don't have to afford all medium. It gives you a range to make choices. The really good news is if there is a district that meets this standard by their own internal standards, it's you guys. Your buildings that were built in the 2000 era, the intermediates, Jackson, Central Crossing, Career Academy, they are best practice examples that OSFC looked at when they made these standards. And so you guys really do fall right in line with size standards and with building material and system standards. And I don't see any real difficulty for you to depart into this design manual in order to go forward and continue the equity that you started with those buildings. So the real good takeaway is I'm going to show you a lot of images of things that meet your guidelines, and they are very, very compatible with the school facilities standards in the design manual. In 2008, we created a long list of priorities for the district, and this was the top 10. And they are all really achievable. They are all really valid. And if you take the ones in black, they are almost a given if you're going to follow the school design manual. There's nothing about ADA compliance or having modular buildings or creating equity that they don't already support and already promote in their standards. The ones in blue are things that are more left up to you because they are not required by the manual, but they are the direction that you have taken the district. So again, the priorities that were set in 2008 are still right on, and I don't see any difficulty as a district for you to move forward in a relationship with the OSFC and continue exactly what you started in 1998. So this is a kind of a quick, lots of images, just talking about design issues and talking about things that have changed maybe since 1998 in the buildings we built earlier. And if I start with the number one thing that's changed in the last 5 years in school design, it is the idea of sustainable design and highly efficient, energy-efficient buildings. Again, this district does it better than most districts in the state. You've always been a very efficient district with your energy usage. 50, 60 cents a square foot, and I know districts that are using over $2 a square foot for energy. So you already are a good district from that standpoint. But what I'll tell you is there are new technologies available just in the last 5 years that we now have available to us that we can make buildings even more efficient than, say, Central Crossing or their Career Academy. And this is an opportunity that has really proven to be a home run in education. Not only are we looking at some of the ways to save energy, we're also changing the indoor environmental quality of buildings dramatically with material choices and with the way we ventilate buildings and the way we use occupancy sensors to monitor the use of energy. And so big takeaway, student health, teacher health goes up, student performance, teacher performance goes up, energy utility cost goes down. There's nothing about that is a trade-off. It's all good news. We can now model buildings to a great degree by building them virtually. This is a mechanical room coming out of a classroom building, and it is actually built to the exact standards by which the real building would be built. We're not estimating ductwork sizes. We're not pretending. We're not using rules of thumb. We're building a virtual building which we can simulate then the energy performance. If we change the size of ductwork, if we change the orientation of windows, or we change anything about the building, we can model that, and we can get an answer as to its energy performance. And so we have a great ability now with the tools we have just in the last few years to have buildings perform for us before we build them. And the results have been reducing energy usage by 50% or more. And it's, again, something that's really happened in just the last 5 years. And so when we look at buildings with ductwork already in place, we look at finishes, we look at the final building, everything was predicted because everything was modeled as if it was going to be real and now is real. 21st century learning environments, the big mantra at OSFC these days, talking about how teaching and learning is changing from the standpoint of spaces that it's being done in. Pretty interesting stuff. There's still lots of traditional legacy type of models, but they are being blended now with Career Academy models, which you guys were one of the early ones in the state to adopt. They're being blended with online learning, and they're being blended with different kinds of group activities within a classroom setting. So just lots of different kinds of classroom shapes that I will tell you exist in this district already because you were some of the first districts to try this kind of thing. Very flexible environments. Furniture has become much more significant in terms of its choices, and the way classrooms are laid out has a lot to do with teaching styles and this blended learning. So a big opportunity there that you have going forward, again, sticking with your standards. Dealing with student security, post-Columbine, we were just getting there when we were here the last time doing new buildings. Pretty standard today, but pretty important, but doing it in ways that buildings are still welcoming and include the public, include the community. Logistics. We are organizing buildings differently. Long spaghetti networks of double-loaded corridors is out, and much more centrally compacted buildings. They're more energy efficient, and they also are easier to manage from the standpoint of supervision. We make buildings very transparent so people in the building can see other people in the building, and it's a way to make buildings feel much more secure in a passive way and not necessarily in a technological way. Traffic patterns. Elementary schools with much larger hallways, it seems like a waste of square footage, but when you organize the building differently, it becomes a great asset to the building in terms of how kids move around in the building. Spaces like this in a core of a building seem like, again, a lot of square footage. This building uses about 6% of its square footage for all the quarters in this building, and including this space here, because it allows for traffic flow to move through the building easier. Again, you can see some transparency issues here, good control of lighting, another transparency issue, making buildings feel like you can tell what's going on, upper floors, lower floors, vertical connections, and then abundant natural light. Seems like an energy issue. But in fact, if dealt with properly, combining natural light with controlled artificial light, much more energy efficient buildings, lower cooling loads, much better environments, and again, one of those things that changes academic performance from the standpoint of how people feel in buildings, but dramatically change the energy use when you get this kind of natural lighting in a building and in a gym. And sure enough, those kinds of ideas were thought about here when we did Central Crossing High School. Lots of central common areas now. Student interaction is changing because classrooms are getting blended in different ways. And so we're looking at different ways that building common spaces are used, not only for academic purposes, but for socialization purposes. And again, a lot of good examples in this district. One of the first places we've ever done this was Central Crossing High School. Fantastic opportunity. Again, natural lighting, daylighting, central core, using square footage efficiently, leaving more square footage for classrooms. It all starts to knit together in an opportunity here. And again, because we have the ability to create a new standard for elementaries in this district, we can lift them all up against these standards all together. So surprising new spaces are showing up in schools. that we used to avoid, and now we are embracing them because of the way they mix with education. Age-appropriate classroom layouts, again, something that we did here early on, making smaller age groups work differently than older age groups. Very different environments, but in standard-sized spaces. Storage opportunities. No teacher ever accused me of putting too much storage in their classroom. And we're doing it differently. This is a more flexible version of the built-in casework idea. Furniture is changing dramatically. Lots of different styles for different reasons for different age groups. And we're not using traditional rows and columns of desks and chairs in every application anymore. Technology, certainly you're aware of all the opportunities that are available in educational technology. What a lot of school districts don't do right is get the environment built around that technology right. You've got to control your daylighting. You have to have acoustics. You have to have ventilation. You have to have furniture that works with your technology. And again, one of the first districts I ever worked with extended learning areas was this district. And we couldn't be more excited about the opportunities that has afforded other districts since then. And a lot of districts around here, as well as in the southwestern part of the state, are really looking to you guys as to how that got started. But it's almost in every district now. The idea of being able to pull kids out and do things adjacent to the classroom is an opportunity, and this is your intermediate schools. Not only did you create the extended learning area, you actually connected classrooms for team teaching. So again, something that was not happening 10 years ago, except here. Larger extended learning areas are now becoming more popular. This is a suite of classrooms that is sharing a much larger area that has even more possible uses. And again, more efficient building layouts avoided the long spaghetti of quarters and turned that square footage into space that is for teaching and learning. You can see that space here between two adjacent classrooms. And even using it for teacher collaboration as well, something that, again, wasn't done before it was done here. So if you look at the idea of best practices, the idea now is taking all this new technology and all these new ideas and integrating them into a new delivery. And again, if you take any one of those things and you do them in a vacuum, you get that improvement. But when you do them all together, you get a really synergistic impact of a totally different teaching and learning environment, which is very exciting. Looking at labs, again, more specifically, larger, more technically oriented, and with more technology integrated. Very, very few traditional science classrooms anymore. We're going to much higher, more technical labs in different applications and adjacent to classrooms. So that mix isn't there that used to be, and Career Academy started that a long time ago as well. This is the blended learning idea. You have traditional teaching and activities going on in the classroom, also with on-screen or online learning going on, and making sure physically and with the technology that can be done in the same learning space. Media centers were pretty generic library spaces 10 years ago, but we got some chances to do some pretty exciting ones here 10 years ago, and they all represent kind of the direction that they're going today. Again, there are spaces that are collaborative places. They are way more than just books. They certainly integrate technology, but they're also integrating daylight and collaboration in all kinds of ways. And there probably isn't anything more unique to each school than the way this gets done in conjunction with its classrooms. And so it becomes kind of the most unique architectural space in schools today. And it's driven completely by sort of the academic approach of each school at each grade level. Another thing we started here, which I'm pretty proud of, is thinking about fine art spaces as not remade classrooms or extra space, that they were designed to purpose, higher ceilings, better acoustics, different shapes, different technology because they are for fine arts. So it's not a leftover English room, it's a music room or an art room. And the things that go into it, including furniture and equipment, are very well thought out. This is Jackson Middle School's art room, a slide we've used for a lot of years. Thinking about natural light again in an art environment, thinking about power and equipment, thinking about acoustics and technology in auditoriums. You've had some of the largest well-equipped auditoriums any district's ever had. Again, but the technology is changing rapidly, and minor renovations to your existing auditoriums can really move them forward. It's an opportunity. Showcasing student achievement. It's become one of the mantras of blended learning and sort of teaching students to be well-rounded. Thinking of these large athletic areas we love to have in schools, but they don't tend to get the kind of academic use they need, making them more flexible. There's an entire second gym behind those bleachers on this main gym. It's their auxiliary gym. And so that bleacher space, which is needed for events, becomes academic space during the day. Same example there on the left with those bleachers. You can see daylighting becoming a big part of these spaces. Elementary-sized gyms being very flexible so we can put more square footage there because they get more uses than just phys ed. Distance learning labs at also community meeting rooms, just like this room is. And then those adaptable environments where we take a small elementary gym and a small elementary cafeteria and we allow them to become a very large event place in a small elementary school for after-school events. You can get 800 parents in a very small school's auditorium, and it's really just made up of a small gym and a small cafeteria that become a large performance space. And then outdoor learning. We are starting to capture outdoor spaces that are secure and finding more and more reasons, more and more ways to get kids in and out of the building. And it's very, very popular and very easy to do without adding significantly to the cost of facilities. And then finally, the idea of keeping the assets that you have that the School Facilities Commission doesn't advocate paying half of, and making sure you can bring them forward in your new buildings. So one of the great ideas that we've always talked about is if we replace Franklin Heights High School, let's not replace the auditorium. Let's keep it as part of whatever kind of new footprint that site allows us to have. Let's bring it up to date, but let's keep that asset because we have a huge investment in it, and we don't get to replace it with the state's money. So let's do the best we can with what we have. This is a recaptured locker room at Stebbins High School that we were able to turn into a new cafeteria. And I'm going to end with just an idea that I'm sure is on your minds here, is the idea of equity and uniqueness. And Hamilton Schools went through a similar project as you are. Their project was to replace all their elementary schools. And they had great concerns about how to create a standard of equity that wouldn't be accused of having a different school on one side of the river than the other. Of course, they wanted each school to be responsive to its neighborhood and unique. So we kind of, as a joke, said, okay, let's get this right. Everything needs to be the same and everything needs to be different. And the answer was, yeah, kind of. And so I'm going to do this quickly, but just to give you the sense that there is a way to approach a prototype elementary school which uses a kit of parts instead of a standard floor plan. And that kit of parts allows you to assemble a school for each site that makes great sense, but also allows for a unique response to each site. So we considered that our goal, that we would create a kit of parts that could be reestablished in different formations on different sites, take all the advantages of the economies of scale, design all the systems the same, all the keying and lock sets the same, all the mechanical control systems the same, but make each building kind of unique. And in the end, this was a board agenda that we were sketching on, and we decided there's kind of three pieces to the elementary schools. There's the core piece in blue, which we would like to be literally identical at every site. There's the red piece that's classrooms. We know there's maybe different size student bodies at each of these sites that we have to have a few different numbers of classrooms, but we want them to perform the same and be the same. And then there's the green in the middle. That's the media center and the administrative areas. And that we wanted to be a unique response at each site. And we were able to do that without having a huge complexity in terms of our buildings. So the 8 new buildings, and that's what we have. We have elementary classrooms that respond to the sun and respond to daylighting and respond to the site constraints. We have core wings that are virtually identical, just maybe rotated. And then we have the green areas that are core that gave every building its uniqueness, and it didn't require that we sort of redesign the response at each building. And so they have 8 new buildings that fit this kit of parts, and they couldn't be more unique. And you can see every one of those spaces is accounted for in those green areas, but they are accounted for in a different architectural solution. And so these are spaces that you enter a school that gives its identity. And again, vastly different from elementary to elementary, architecturally and physical form, and that translates into the entry to the outside of the building. Again, these buildings are virtually identical in most of their components and identical in terms of square footage, and yet they couldn't look more different from just a small selection of architectural items that relate to this entrance in that core space. So what Hamilton has is a very, very great system of new equity across the entire district, all new buildings that are high performance and great energy users, but are very unique in terms of how they address each of their neighborhoods and their entire community. And yeah, there are people who think one's their favorite and one's not their favorite, but overall, everyone loves their buildings in their own communities. We also established a set of finishes and color schemes that made each building different, even in those wings that are virtually identical. And obviously, things like daylighting we accomplished in every building because that was our goal. These are some of our patterns, our finish selections. You can see there was a different brand, sort of in colors and finishes to each school, a different sort of theme. Even fabric choices, as simple as that you can see now in the application of carpet, fabrics, lighting, paint finishes. Each building has its own identity, and yet these spaces are virtually inch for inch identical. Media centers are where we varied. This is where each building has its own identity architecturally. All the same square footages, but they all have a different style and a different approach. And this was massively successful in a community that doubted that we could achieve this, especially the equity part. And we did, and I think it's worth a trip to visit if you want to see it in person. So I will stop there. I'm sure you have more questions of Andrew's technical numbers and things than you do of the big slideshow I showed, but we're both here to help you get to the next step.
One thing I might add is when you think about the questions of prototyping, which we know from our past projects here is an important issue, we've also looked at each of your existing elementary school sites. We've begun to understand what some of those issues would be and how would we accommodate replacement buildings on those various sites. The good news is, and without getting into, again, a bunch of specific details, is you've got some great assets in the district by way of the land that you have for the existing buildings. And so using some strategies to fit construction on those properties is an important consideration that we needed to look at early on. And we've done that, and there's a lot more work to be done, but we're very confident that a lot of your existing properties will be amenable to new construction.